Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Yeah, that's a really profound question. I'm trying to do the best I can with this, Jason. Yeah, I'll just say, like, from my perspective as a writer, like, I've always used crime, a narrative of a criminal story, I guess you'd say, as kind of like the Trojan horse. Like, you're going to get through the story, through the crime narrative, but you're going to get something else. And, to me, it was like I was using crime narrative with like Devil in the Grove, but I really wanted you to understand what justice looked like in the Deep South during the Jim Crow era. That's what I wanted people to understand, the politics, the money, just how the system worked. And that's a look at, from like the prosecutor's point of view, like, how did you make these guys guilty? And because I had access to all these records, you could see it. It was there. All the FBI records, the story was right there. The FBI did an amazing job on this investigation. So it became about something larger. I think as I've gotten, like, the next book I did after that, it became more of a human story. It was about this mentally disabled kid who was railroaded for a sexual assault because the real perpetrator was actually Black. And because they were socialites and upstanding people in society, she couldn't bear the stigma of having been sexually assaulted by a Black man. So the power in the community got together and found a mentally disabled white kid, pin it on him so she wouldn't become a pariah and have this stigma. I thought, what the hell is that? It's almost one of those perverse stories I've ever heard. But that actually happened. And so it became about something much larger, and just recognizing the humanity of, like, journalists and lawyers who just, like, risk their career to go after and help this kid for years. It became a story about love in a lot of ways. And I think just as I'm just getting older, I feel things a little more deeply. And so I've been seeing these things in these stories, and, just sitting down with Jamie and just looking in her eyes and listening to her, and just her feeling like safe that she can tell this story. It's a huge responsibility. Like, how are you going to handle this? Like, are you going to do it right? And I just feel like people come into this, like, Bone Valley universe, and they really are picking up the spirit of Leo. And I just find it's infectious. It's infected the people around them. You see it in fans sometimes, like just listeners, they feel it too. But the people who are like Justin, just saying, like, I feel guilty, I'm alive because, if my father would have got caught, I never would have been born. I mean, he really feels that. And I remember giving Leo the first 2 episodes, and he was in tears. He goes, I got to meet Justin. Like, I got to hug this kid. He shouldn't be carrying that kind of guilt. Like, Leo wanted to fix it. And, it's just like this all emanates
That's Gilbert King, the author of 2 award-winning books on civil rights and the host of the podcast Bone Valley. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. This is the second of 2 episodes with Gilbert King. Gilbert is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author of several books on the Jim Crow era and the host of the podcast Bone Valley, which explored the conviction of Leo Schofield for the murder of his wife, Michelle, and the second season, which began last week, and focuses on the man who says he killed Michelle, Jeremy Scott. In essence, the first season is about a man who's wrongfully convicted that the authorities do not believe, and the second is about a man who's trying to admit to murders that the authorities don't believe. But season 2 of Bone Valley explores something much deeper. We hear from the son that Jeremy had never met, Justin, who had grown up only knowing the dark sides of his father's past, and even those, the picture was oblique. We talk about Jeremy's life as a child, the abuse he had suffered, being thrown away, and we also talk about his confessions to a string of murders. In many ways, we talk about how Jeremy's past leaves you questioning the concept of rehabilitation, at least for some people. But what Bone Valley Season 2 makes clear is that there's something beyond rehabilitation and re-entering society that doesn't preclude someone's redemption. After all, even a man sentenced to life in prison or to death has the opportunity to make the most of what remains of their life in the confines of the restrictions that have been placed upon them. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the first episode, I recommend you jump back and you give it a listen. We're going to go ahead and start again where we left off and explore more of Justin, Jeremy, and Leo's stories. One of the other things in Bone Valley too, perhaps, so that I had 2 absolute tears moments in Bone Valley too. One was when, he hadn't heard from his Aunt Debbie, and you found out that she had passed away a couple of years before, and you told him, and he said, "I knew she'd never abandon me." That was one. And then I think, well, I mean, there may have been more, but I think these are the 2 that sort of stick out in my mind. And I think that there was something about that moment where thinking that he's so alone in this world really grabbed me. And then the second moment for me was when Leo's friend from his pastoral program where they had become pastors, his friend Oscar gets transferred to Jeremy's prison. He's giving a talk to other inmates there, telling them a little bit about what they're doing. Because my understanding was they had transferred a bunch of these inmates who had been trained as sort of lay ministers to different prisons. And Jeremy's nervous because he knows the guy's a friend of Leo's, and he gets the courage to say, "Hey, I'm Jeremy Scott." And then Oscar tells him, instead of sort of punching him in the face or spitting at him or telling him to go away, he tells him that they've been praying for him, that Leo has been praying for him. Yeah. And I just thought, if Leo Schofield is innocent, he is a man who's been wrongfully convicted for a murder that you committed of his wife. And you, without Jeremy knowing and without for any particular reason, you have been there praying for him. Yeah. And I just thought, I have these 2 guys in this story. One, Leo Schofield, who is praying for the man who says he killed his wife, and one Jeremy Scott who's trying to free Leo Schofield.
Yeah.
And oh,
I know it's so intense. And I actually really was like, Oscar sort of dropped out of the sky for me. Because one time I think Leo called me up and said, "Hey, you know what? I got a friend of mine that I went to the theological school, and he's up there with Jeremy right now." And I'm like, "You're kidding me." And so I wrote to him, and he wrote me back, and he said, "Guy, I just had this really wonderful conversations with him." And you could just sort of see the influence of like somebody who's studied theological school and someone who was so close to Leo, where a lot of it just kind of rubbed off on him. And, like, and he says, "I know you, sir." Like he talks to Jeremy, "I know who you are, sir." And he shook his hand. And like, that was like interesting to hear from Oscar, but to hear Jeremy just be so surprised that someone who was close to Leo was willing to shake his hand and be kind to him. Like he got choked up telling me that. And, I just thought like there's something going on here. And I'll say this to this day, like this whole story just springs from who Leo is.
yeah.
Like, it just goes outward. You see it in Jamie, you see it in Justin. They can't stop talking about Leo. And Jeremy can't either. And all of these people are just, they know the truth. And they're willing to like reveal some of the most horrific parts of their lives because they think that somehow the truth needs to be out there because it will be helpful to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. I was moved by that a lot too. I got to say, Jason, like when I talked to like, Jeremy about it, like, and even Oscar just checking in on him and counseling him and talking about like Jeremy not wanting to be buried in the prison cemetery. Like that stuff really got to me. That really was just, why is he talking about this to Oscar? It's just like, they must have some connection.
Yeah. And it's deep, and it's obviously deep. And it's like, it's funny, that line, "the truth will set you free." It's sort of doing that for everybody here, right? For Jeremy's son to truthfully get to know the reality. His dad was a boogeyman in his head, and that there's some truth to that, but that there's also this person in there who is just looking for love and who's hurting. Having that truth seems so important for Justin, having that realistic view. And then for Leo, the truth that Jeremy is bringing is what's propelling this opportunity for freedom. And then the love that Leo and everyone else, like, they actually care about Jeremy's well-being. I think Keats said, "Truth is beauty and beauty is truth," something close to that. And I think that there's something, if you look at the characters in the story, no matter what they've done, something about the truth is really being used to give them internally freedom. Like, you talk about that moment where Leo's like, "I do have some responsibility for this, my actions." Like, the people searching for and giving the truth has been of such benefit. Another powerful moment too in it is the moment where you happen to walk into Leo's hospital room after he had been in an accident. He and his daughter Ashley had been in a motorcycle accident, near fatal. Um, and uh, and and that in itself is a big one.
It's funny. I was thinking about this because it's like, I think about Bryan Stevenson a lot because I really just love his work and love him as a person. And, he talks about like, if you really want to understand injustice, you got to be proximate. You got to be on the ground. You got to be there. And I've always just thought like, all right, I'm not a lawyer, but like, that's the way I want to be involved in these stories, Yeah. And so like, I'm down there to visit Leo and it was in he'd just gotten out of the hospital, but he was in a hospital bed in his living room.
Okay.
It's like, and it was just like, a big hospital bed, but right in his living room. That was his place. And, he's can't bear any weight for 3 months after this accident because he's got an open book pelvis fracture, which is like, that's usually a fatal injury.
Yeah.
It's a little lucky. And so, he's got to lay in his bed for 3 months. And, I was there because I had been talking to Jeremy and I was down there anyway, but I wanted to go visit Leo. And, we were there for a while talking, and Jeremy had been calling me lately, once or twice a week, but I never knew when it was going to be. It was when, when they handed him a phone, and it could be any time. And a lot of times I just miss his call. I didn't catch him, but, I wait till next week, I guess. But this time I was right there and it rang. And I was like, oh my God, now I'm here with Leo. Like, what
am I going to do?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to not pick up on Jeremy, but also like, I don't want to put him on the spot if he just feels like that's uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to push that. So I just asked Leo, like, this is Jeremy. Like, should I take it? And Leo was like, yeah. And then I asked Jeremy and he said, yeah, I'll talk to him. And I just put it on speakerphone, started recording. And it was surreal. It was a 13-minute conversation. And, it started out kind of awkwardly. Like, Jeremy was very nervous. And it was part of his personality kind of emerged that I hadn't seen. He started joking around about learning how to ride a bike again, like it's been a long time, and making those kind of jokes about that. And, Leo's trying to laugh along with him, but Leo's like in a lot of pain at this time, and is
right.
Not very comfortable. And he just like got right to it. And, you could tell he'd put a lot of thought into this and definitely wasn't planning for it this day, but he went through it. I won't tell you the word for people. I won't spoil it for your listeners, but he did he did what Leo you'd expect him to do. He was that person.
Yes.
And he just forgave him and told him he loved him.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, what was really interesting about it was like Jeremy was at a kiosk. And so there's these guys all around him waiting to use the phone. And so you can't start getting emotional and, in front of those guys. It's like not a good thing to do. And so you could sort of tell he was restrained, but you could hear it in his voice. He was, and Ivan was really moved by the small talk that they made, but like Jeremy ended up saying, I just hated that this happened, bro. I really did. And, Leo's just like, I hate that it happened too. Like he knew that where Jeremy was, he knew that was the words he was choosing. And it was just so powerful. And then, they kept talking again. And it was like, Leo just fell into who Leo is. He was mentoring him. You got to get through that program. You're going to be out of there. You got to go to a different program, and that, you got to put in a good, clean year. And, I could see that that's who Leo was in the prison,
Right.
And Jeremy's like, it's tough, man. You got to pray for me. And like, they're trying to kill me down here. He was helping out a downtrodden prisoner that he cared about. And I thought it was just so powerful in a lot of ways. But I think the really interesting part was when like Jeremy processed it and wanted to call me back, where he had some more freedom, I guess, at the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just so much more eloquent about what had just happened. And like so humane in a lot of ways. And I just kept thinking like for a couple of years, our relationship was like me sending him books and talking about the books. And, I just do that. It was a form of escape for him. But I also felt like he was relating to characters and was kind of having empathy in ways like for certain characters, like in Game of Thrones, he really cared that the Stark children were getting killed. And he's like, how can you kill off the kids like that? Like
the Red Wedding and the other ones.
Yeah. And it's like, there's just 2 girls left in the cripple, he said, like, it's just, he was struggling with it. And he was very upset that Jon Snow died. And I think, I must spoil this for you.
He sounds like my colleague who cries when when people die in the Transformers movie.
Yeah. I think those like, after like a lot of our conversations around like books that he was reading, and they would.
You send him books, right?
Yeah. And, like a lot of them are like Westerns or like detective novels, but I tried to mix it up and send him like Hunger Games and just give him some different genres. And he really likes them. But he said to me a couple times, he goes, you would have laughed at me if I hated reading when I was a kid. Like I couldn't read. Because now I just love it. And I think I could have been a different person if I'd have been exposed to this. It's just like heartbreaking to hear that. But when he got on the phone with me, like he was talking about his feelings and how Leo's words made him feel. And I just thought, this guy's feeling everything now. Like he has remorse. He has joy at this reconnection with his family. And you just see definitely a more rounded human being. And nobody wants Jeremy Scott out of prison. He does not belong out of prison. I don't think he can be rehabilitated. But, the question is, can he be redeemed? And
Right.
I think go to Leo for that. Like, Leo does believe that. And I think he taught a lot of us, not just me, but a lot of the people in the story, how to maybe feel and think about Jeremy. And, I just think it was one of the most beautiful and rare things that I'll ever experience.
Yeah.
And I was just honored to be able to tell that story.
And to be a part of those moments for them, because I don't think it's not every day in any of our lives that, a man is going to put himself at, and I'm thinking of Jeremy here, at such risk for the truth to help you, right? That's a very loving thing. And then it's not every day that you are going to murder someone's loved one and they are going to forgive you.
Yeah.
And, it's not every day that, it probably took strength for Jeremy, I imagine, to even engage with Justin, his son, and for Justin to even go out there, and for Justin's mom, Jamie, to even talk about Jeremy again. I see all of these huge, not just moments of love, but emotional moments for other people. And it really made me think that there is something so missing in the way that we think of criminal justice. Like, we sentence people, to punish them, to protect the public, right? To incapacitate them from harming other people, for retribution. That's definitely a part of it. And then also for rehabilitation. But it made me really think that there is a difference between rehabilitation and redemption, because rehabilitation suggests that you're going to reintegrate back into society again.
Right.
But redemption is something very different. It may not lead you back into society, but it may be even more important. And I don't even know if it really has to do with whether I view Jeremy Scott as redeemed or anyone else does, but that he feels it.
Yeah, it's it's a strange thing, because if you have emotions that, I've had so many people tell me this, even prosecutors, I couldn't believe that how I was feeling about Jeremy. Like, they didn't think they were capable of thinking that way. And it's really nothing more than just exposing his humanity in a very unique way. I think when you talk about, I was just, this week I did a talk with Sister Helen Prejean in Ohio for the Ohio Innocence Project. And I got to, talk a lot about.
And she's the one featured in Dead Man Walking.
Right.
Yeah.
Dead Man Walking. It's played by Susan Sarandon, which
right?
It's a great movie too.
Yeah, excellent.
But, she talks a lot about what she does when she goes into the prisons and counsels people on death row. She's very much anti-capital punishment. But part of her process is she has to meet with the families of the victim. That's part of it, and explain to them what she's doing and why she's doing it. And not everybody is gung-ho about this, everyone's different. I think in some cases that they get a lot of support, and there's this sort of restorative way. What more would you want, I guess, if you're about to see the killer of your loved one get a lethal injection or go to the electric chair? About the best you can hope for is this guy to close it and say, I did what I'm being punished for, and I'm sorry for it.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
We see you getting after your fitness goals. But what about those money goals? You can count on Credit Karma. for a clear view of your finances and your progress, helping you see results so you can keep checking off those financial personal bests and find your way to money. Progress never felt so good. Download the Intuit Credit Karma app and start achieving your money goals today. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Hyundai knows the road can feel like it's out to get you sometimes. Potholes lurking around corners, distracted pedestrians stepping out of nowhere, and those nerve-wracking blind spot moments we all dread. That's why they've been revolutionizing safety for nearly 2 decades. With over 130 IIHS Top Safety Awards since 2006, they're not just talking about safety, they're defining it. Their available class-exclusive features include the available blind spot view monitor that shows you a live video feed of your blind spots, the standard forward collision avoidance assist that can automatically brake in emergencies, and a standard driver attention warning system that helps keep you focused on the road. Because at Hyundai, they put your safety first and everything else second. Learn more about Hyundai at HyundaiUSA.com. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details. IIHS Top Safety Awards include Top Safety Pick and Top Safety Pick Plus awards to Hyundai vehicles from 2006 to 2025.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
I was struggling for the past year and a half, 2 years with trying to lose weight.
I just can't get rid of the stubborn weight in my legs and in my belly.
While everyone is unique and will have varied results, here are extraordinary experiences from independent body affiliates and actual Belvital users.
There's nothing more frustrating than knowing that you're eating well, but it's not working.
Hormone imbalances were preventing these women from losing weight. Now there's a comprehensive plan to help.
With Belvital, I just noticed changes immediately. That stubborn scale finally moved. In this first week, I lost 5 pounds.
Just after 1 week, I'm down 6 pounds and all of my bloating is gone.
I just finished the Belvital program. I have lost 15 pounds and I have never felt better.
I've noticed inches just shed every week that I go through.
I feel like an entirely different person. I don't know if I've ever felt this good.
Get hormone health for women at Belvital.com. And while supplies last, save 15% with promo code BV15.
That's about all you can get. You're not going to bring the person back. And that's what it reminded me of what Jeremy's doing.
It's the gift that you can give.
Right. And that's what Sister Helen talks about. Like, you can still do one good thing here. You know, we can't stop your execution, but you can ease the suffering of this rippling victimhood that goes out because of your actions. And that, to me, is what Jeremy's doing. He's not quite on the gurney or in the electric chair, but he's recognizing he's not getting out, but this is what I can do. And that he did it. I mean, Leo says, like, it took courage to do that. And it does, because I'm telling you, you don't want to be in prison being known as someone who, like, butchered a teenage girl.
Right.
You know, it's not the place you want to be when you having done something like and admitted to it. So, you know, his life in prison is not easy. He still has struggles. He gets moved around a lot. He's in new environments. He's kind of a wanted man. And I think about this too. I worry about him.
What do you mean by kind of a wanted man?
Well, he's had some issues from the past where, and we sort of get into it a little bit in season 2, but he was at a prison in South Florida, and the way he explained it to me was he was put in a cell, and there was a bunch of drugs in this cell, and by being put in that cell meant you were the lookout guy. And like something happened. I don't know exactly what happened, but he either got a reputation of having snitched or did something, and immediately the prison officials found out about it and said, he's got to be moved. He's a dead man. And they moved him out immediately, transferred him. But, you know, there's contraband cell phones in prisons, and you know, he found out that there was a hit on him. And, you know, I believe that part of it because, you know, he lives that way.
Right.
And, you know, he ended up being in a situation where he knew the guy who was coming after him, and he decided to take action first. And
right, he stabbed him, right?
Yeah.
His bed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, he wasn't remorseful, but he wasn't proud either. I mean, one of the things that he said is like, Mr. King, I just want you to know, I could have killed him. I could have put it right in his heart, but I didn't.
Huh.
I'm
Interesting.
going like, baby steps, Jeremy.
right.
But like after he told me, like, because he wrote me this cryptic note, like it was like a goodbye note. It was like, Mr. King, I wish you the best. I don't hold you or society any blame, but the monster in me is coming alive one last time. They're going to lock me up. Goodbye.
Whoa.
And I'm like, and this was like hours before he stabbed the guy. That was his
Oh,
last
wow.
note.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't heard from him for months. And, it was just absolutely bizarre that like, is there any doubt like which person here killed Michelle? Like, do we doubt this now? I mean, just so preposterous. But yeah, he, that's sort of the way I think he has to live. He says, I'm just, if they're going to kill me, I'm going to fight back. Like, that's who I am. But he doesn't cause any problems like in the prisons. He's not that person anymore. He's definitely older and mellow. And even though he had that incident, I think, most of his stuff, he prefers being in solitary now. He feels safer there.
And it sounds like there's a way for him, even if he doesn't go back into society, for him to get better and healthier. And
honestly, I don't hold a lot of hope out. I just think like, I just worry about him a lot. He's got some bad health issues. He does have people around him now, which I think raises his spirit, but he's still got prison dramas that he has to deal with and, people coming after him. And I was talking to Leo about it, and Leo just sort of explained it like, this is who he is. That's how he's known in this prison. And it's the whole system. People move around and he has a reputation and it's never going to be easy for him. And I think that's why he prefers to be in solitary now, which is like, I can't even imagine that.
It's kind of sad. Yeah. But, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it is the safe answer. So another question for you. So, the same criticism could be made about me. So I hypocritically asked this question. What about people who say, and so I'll say people like you and I, who that you get too close to your sources to sort of fairly cover the story.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll tell you what my general thought is. Yes, there are a billion stories in the world for me to cover, and if I choose one, I probably have some feelings about it. But you tell me, what would you say to those folks?
I think it's just different because I come from the world of like, narrative nonfiction books. These things take me 5 or 6 years to do. And I think that, what's the most compelling is like, I do a lot of investigation before I get to the point where I like want to do the story. And I've looked at stories for months. I don't have a deadline of like 3 weeks. I have what really amounts to like all the time I need. And, I spend so much time investigating that before I commit to a story. So I'm pretty much committed. And then it's a matter of like, where do I get the information now? In my last book, I had a lawyer who had defended a mentally disabled kid and totally believed he was innocent and was being railroaded. And he had all the case knowledge and all the files and everything. And so once I believed that this was the truth, this was the case, I needed access to him. I needed him every single step of the way. What were you thinking when you drove to the courthouse that day? And I make no apologies and there's no bones about it. I am close to my sources because I want to get the story. I would love to be embedded with the prosecutor's office and let them have me in there and asking questions and looking at their files all day long, but they generally don't want me in there. So it usually ends up I'm in the defense on the defense side. But it doesn't really like. There's certain things that come up. Like I had in my last book, I had a deputy who was working for Willis McCall, and he was a whistleblower, and he came up to me at a book talk. And he's like, "You got your book right, but why don't you write about this kid?" And he started telling me about this story. And I said, I've heard of that kid, but like nobody will talk about that kid. And he goes, no, nobody will ever talk because that's a rich kid, a rich family that was a victim. It's not the same. It was the mayor's wife, and it was a little bit different. And everything he was telling me was checking out. But as I was investigating, I found out that like there were some things that he did that weren't so, on the up and up. And I like, sorry, I got to put this in the book. Like, this is important to the story. And like, this is, you lied to the FBI, and I can prove it. So that's in the book. I'm sorry, like, I'm not going to hold back stuff that isn't, but for the most part, everything he did was great. And I'm like, listen, Willis McCall had some power over people, and sometimes you just did what he said. And he did that for a while. But eventually he couldn't take it anymore. So like, he had the story, he had the documents, he saved things from the case that he showed me, like that never got turned over to anybody. And he pulled him out of his safe. I was like, oh my God, you're kidding me. Yeah, it's a horrible story of race, stuff, but I don't want to even get into it. But there were some times where he even said this to me. He said, like, in order to I couldn't get the newspapers to print the stories of the things I was saying. So I went to the NAACP, but don't put that in the book, because I don't want people knowing that I went to the NAACP.
Wow.
And I'm like, sorry, dude, you're in the records of this. Like, I found the entry of like this cowboy out in the NAACP. It's like, it's part of the story. Like, and he just did not want that in the book. And I just said, I'm sorry. I mean, this happened. And so like,
well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm thinking back to my, what I would call my straight journalism days. But I remember sources that I was really close to where I did have conversations with them like that, where it was, we really like each other, but this is a part of the story that has to be told. I actually think sometimes that actually made me, when you cover a story and you allow the characters in the story to become real humans to you, it allows you to even have compassion for some of the people who don't let you get close to them.
Yeah.
And I think it can be a powerful thing. So
yeah, that's funny. I would say one more thing, because I think this is really interesting, because this came up again. It's come up in a couple times. Like, somebody asked me recently, did you ever ask Jeremy how many people he killed? I'm like, no, I don't have that kind of relationship with him. Like, we just, it's like, it's spontaneous. I don't get into the interrogative modes. Sometimes he's in a really good mood and I can ask a couple detailed questions, but I'm really careful about it, because these guys carry some trauma from some of this stuff. And
that's something we forget.
Yeah.
We so forget that the perpetrator carries as much trauma as the victims. I was, there was a recent case where a man was arrested in 2022 for killing 2 young girls out in Indiana, and Richard Allen, Delphi, and people were saying to me at one point, where he was sort of like showing some signs of some real mental health issues. They were like, what is the deal? Is this all because he was caught? And I'm like, guys, you got to think about this. It's traumatic to witness a crime. And when you're committing a crime, you are actually both committing and witnessing a traumatic event that you are also responsible for. That is going to affect many people's mental health.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I was watching the Murdaugh verdict. And the judge in that case, I forget his name, but
Newman, Clifford Newman.
That's right. And he was talking, he said something really interesting. You can find it like on YouTube. He said, I've never met a murder, even a confessed murder, in my entire legal career that can take you right up to the point of the actual murder. They get you there, like how they got there, and then they get you there in the aftermath of it, but they don't get you to that spot where they tell you what they did. And there's a reason for it. They shut down. You're trying to protect yourself from like the worst of
yourself.
You got a lot of denials.
Yeah.
But when you're telling the truth, it's pretty brutal for them. And I'm not doing it because I don't want Jeremy to feel any trauma or guilt about it. I'm doing it because you're not in a good place to answer questions when you're like that. And so you've got to try different ways to get around it and sort of get them comfortable. And, like just asking a question like, how many people did you kill? Like, it's just like, why? Like, there's so many more interesting ways to get him talking. I never asked Leo if he killed Michelle either. And, like, I know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but it's because, like, you didn't have to. Like, to keep him talking and to keep him was just not confronting him with these police kind of questions for the TV moment or whatever. Like, I'm here for the long run. I'm going to get everything, but we're not going to do it like that. Like, that's the role that you.
It's interesting you say that, because I think about like the worst things I've done in my life, and I tell the stories in a very, very similar way. I will walk you up to said bad thing I did, and then I will take a giant leap over the bad thing. While flying over it, I will take responsibility for it. Then I will land and tell you about the aftermath. But if you are just, let's say, in my living room talking to me and it naturally comes up, because I'm thinking in the first scenario when I'm being interviewed, it will just naturally come out in all of its details because I'm comfortable.
Right.
And I don't feel judged, and I feel like I'm being dealt with like a human. And that does remind me of the way that Jeremy described the murder of Michelle in Bone Valley. Like you get the detailed story of how, he got the ride from her, how it sort of went wrong. You get the aftermath, but you don't actually get the details of the killing from him.
No, and he'll just say, I lost it. And then, I smoked a cigarette and then I wrapped her up in plastic and dragged her down to the water. Like, that's easier for him to talk about. But the actual moment of the murder, like I looked him in his eyes when he was describing it, and, I could just see it. Like, he just glassed over and he just got past the moment. And like, that's fine. There was a point where I asked him in writing this time. I kind of asked him to go to that moment. I said, I need more information on this cab driver. And I said, you started talking about it, but I didn't really get a lot of time with you. I'm wondering if you could sit down and write me a letter. And he wrote me a 6-page letter, and he went right through the moment. He definitely wrote about the moment, shooting this guy. And, he goes, I know I shot him 3 times. And
I remember he said something like, he talks about driving with the cab driver, trying to rob him, the guy lying to him, telling him he didn't have money. And then all of a sudden the gun was in his.
Yeah. And that's a common thing. You'll see that a lot with murders. Like, they'll have some little excuse there. Like, it had a hair trigger, it just went boom, like,
right.
I didn't do, but then like he says, but I shot him 3 times. Like,
right. Yes. Right. And I'm pretty sure it was 3 times.
Yeah. Wow. And he even said, like, I after the first shot, he was coming at me, like he knew, he remembered all that shit. But like the details of that case are just staggeringly accurate.
Yep.
Like, it's stuff that didn't come out, and even in the trial,
the railroad tracks piece of it. Yeah. I was like, well,
and also like he said, like, I hid in an abandoned house and they were out there. And I could hear him because I was just convinced they were going to get me. He could hear dogs barking.
And he drew a map, right?
He drew the map. The map was phenomenal. He pointed out witnesses he knew because he grew up in that town. And like he said, oh, they're coming. I better say something. So he said, get away. It's going to blow the car.
The car, right?
And like, that scared the witnesses. And, it's just, there's so much with that case that drove me crazy. And I finally went into the state attorney's office and I said, look, you got to look at this. And they were like reasonable. They said, yeah, we're reopening this case. Like, it was obvious. And then 2 months later, they go, couldn't find the evidence because it's been destroyed. And it's like, God, it's never going to end. But,
but at least they know. At least the loved ones know now.
Yeah. And I ended up like calling Dan Odie. Like, I just wanted to give him an update of everything. I sort of felt like I'd gone as far as I can go for now. But I wanted to sort of apologize because I felt like I knew who did it. And it would have been like,
that's the son. Is that the son?
No, this was the guy who got arrested for killing.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. He
tried twice. He finally got acquitted, but
he was acquitted. Yeah.
But like, he went through some bad stuff. Like, his mom got really sick while he was in prison. She just like had a couple strokes, and he thought he was going to die, and that he couldn't defend himself, and he really was worried about this. And I came back to him, and I just said, look, I know who did this, but I don't think you're ever going to get an official notice. And, the sheriff's office said something absolutely horrible when they went to for a response to like the new evidence, they said, no, we looked into it. Dan Odie's the right guy, and he got off on a technicality. I'm like, technicality? He got off on a not
guilty verdict. That's not really a technicality.
I mean,
that's
like,
right.
That's like,
That would be the
like,
opposite. That is substantive.
And like, these are the guys who are always talking about finality and respecting a jury. Like, except we got the guy. That guy out there is a murderer. He got off on a technicality. I was just so livid when I read that. That was one of the reasons I decided I'm going to go into it again. Just was so
get to that piece of it.
Dan was great. Like, he just said, you know what? Yeah, I can't believe how much time you put in this, and people know. I show them the article from the Orlando Sentinel, and I tell them to listen to the podcast, and like, they know that I didn't do it. So you're good. Don't worry.
Yeah. I
was like, oh, you let me off the hook.
I was going to ask you about something that's sort of like far field that I wondered about. I know you went to Brett and Alice from the prosecutors and asked them to look into the case. And I found that to be very interesting because, I think Brett and Alice are very, very good at analyzing and digging into cases. And, I don't know if you've ever met Julia Cowley, who's from the...
I've talked to her before.
Okay, consult. Yeah, Brett made this joke a couple weeks ago. Like, Julia is the only one on the planet who... when she's looking into a case after him, he gets scared. And I'm like, well, everybody else gets scared when you look into a case after them. So, so why did you do it? Why did you give it to him because, I mean, they could have come out the exact opposite way.
See, I don't think they could have, because there's a lot of stuff we didn't put in the podcast just because it's just like, there's so much detail. And I put a lot in my book. I did write a book about this. I just handed it in like last week.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's got a lot more in there, like, like for stuff like, because the trial, there's no audio from that. It's hard to like really just read transcripts to people on a radio show. But there's a lot more. I was 100% confident that even though it's not in the podcast, it's like, if you look at this stuff, my experience was I went to prosecutors and I asked them to look at the evidence and look at this. And they did it as a favor to me. And they, I had judges do it. I had academics do it. And I wanted to be challenged by this. And I got to the point where like, they were like looking at it like, this guy's definitely innocent. There's no way, when you look at the totality of it, and you have to consider the prosecutorial like misconduct. Like, why are they lying all the time? Why are they misrepresenting this evidence in the appellate courts?
Right.
Why are they doing that? Like, there's a pattern that emerges. So I was just really confident because I am a fan of them and I listen to their shows and I know how thorough they are. And I just said, well, if I get it to somebody smart like this, they're going to see this. And I knew it. And then it was just a matter of like, I was fully confident if I just turned over certain records and they saw it and they saw the discrepancies, they would get it. And they did, but it is a hard case because, it's hard to believe that this case even happened. And like a husband's always the first suspect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You look at it like, well, they fought a lot. Well, he said these things, like there's a lot there. And the father found the body, like there's a lot of that kind of stuff that makes it like an interesting, like true crime thing with red herrings and all that. But I think when you look at the totality of the case, it's pretty undeniable. I haven't yet really met anybody who's been able to like dig into it. Go, no, I don't see it this way. Like, pretty clear. So I just knew that the way they work and how diligent they are with the cases that they look into, I just kind of knew that they'd have to go this way.
You knew they'd be able to see it.
Yeah. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. Fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Lowe's, Levi's, and Nike pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cash back. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It's a no-brainer. Membership is free and easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up.
If your dog could talk, they'd beg for Ollie. The full-body tail wag, the excited little hops, the big, goofy grin. That's the Ollie effect. Ollie delivers clean, fresh nutrition in 5 drool-worthy flavors, even for the pickiest eaters. Made in U.S. kitchens with highest quality human-grade ingredients, Ollie's food contains no fillers, no preservatives, just real food. And here's the thing. Healthier food means a happier pup. More energy, shinier coats, better poops, and more excitement at mealtime. With 5 protein-packed recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes or fresh turkey with blueberries, even the pickiest eaters can't resist. You might think, dang, my dog eats better than I do. And that's probably true when it comes to Ollie. Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Head to ollie.com/Wondery. Tell them all about your dog and use code WONDERY to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/Wondery and enter code WONDERY to get 60% off your first box.
Yeah, because it's interesting because I think a lot of people, would have a tendency, instead of handing it over to the honest brokers, hand it over to somebody who's more likely to lean into the, the innocence camp or the whichever camp you think. So I thought it was interesting and courageous, despite what you say. Choice. I don't know if I would want them coming behind me.
Yeah, I know. But, I'm not a lawyer either. So, I remember Alice said, man, if I did that, I would have been making all these notes, pointing to people, look at this. He just dumped it on us and said, take a look.
Right, exactly. Here are the files. Good luck.
Maybe I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. Was I supposed to steer them? I don't just say.
They'll figure it out. So that actually brings me to another thing. So when I originally, listened to Bone Valley Season 1, I thought, okay, this is a story about true crime, but more. After listening to Bone Valley Season 2, I've really begun to reevaluate. Because while I think it's about crime, I think it's about something much bigger and something bigger that we can all relate to. I think anyone who looks at Jeremy Scott and says that they can't find something human in him, something relatable into him, is just lying to themselves. And same with Leo and Justin and Jamie and the other characters in the story. But I've really begun to reevaluate whether, and I don't know what it is, it's something greater than just true crime. There's something about the truth in this. There's something about humanity in this. So what is Bone Valley?
Yeah, that's a really profound question. I'm trying to do the best I can with this, Jason. Yeah, I'll just say, from my perspective as a writer, I've always used crime, a narrative of a criminal story, I guess you'd say, as kind of like a Trojan horse. You're going to get through the story, through the crime narrative, but you're going to get something else. And, to me, it was like I was using crime narrative with Devil in the Grove, but I really wanted you to understand what justice looked like in the Deep South during the Jim Crow era. That's what I wanted people to understand, the politics, the money, just how the system worked. And that's a look at, from the prosecutor's point of view, how did you make these guys guilty? And because I had access to all these records, you could see it. It was there. All the FBI records, the story was right there. The FBI did an amazing job on this investigation. So it became about something larger. I think as I've gotten, the next book I did after that, it became more of a human story. It was about this mentally disabled kid who was railroaded for a sexual assault because the real perpetrator was actually Black. And because they were socialites and upstanding people in society, she couldn't bear the stigma of having been sexually assaulted by a Black man. So the power in the community got together and found a mentally disabled white kid, pinned it on him so she wouldn't become a pariah and have this stigma. I thought, what the hell is that? It's almost one of those perverse stories I've ever heard. But that actually happened. And so it became about something much larger and just recognizing the humanity of journalists and lawyers who just risk their career to go after and help this kid for years. It became a story about love in a lot of ways. And I think just as I'm just getting older, I feel things a little more deeply. And so I've been seeing these things in these stories and, just sitting down with Jamie and just looking in her eyes and listening to her and just her feeling like safe that she can tell this story. It's a huge responsibility. Like, how are you going to handle this? Like, are you going to do it right? And I just feel like people come into this like Bone Valley universe and they really are picking up the spirit of Leo. And I just find it's infectious. It's infected the people around them. You see it in fans sometimes, like just listeners, they feel it too. But the people who are like Justin just saying like, I feel guilty, I'm alive because, if my father would have got caught, I never would have been born. I mean, he really feels that. And I remember giving Leo the first 2 episodes and he was in tears. He goes, I got to meet Justin. Like, I got to hug this kid. He shouldn't be carrying that kind of guilt. Like, Leo wanted to fix it. And, it's just like this all emanates. And even like Mary, the house cleaner, who starts to write to Jeremy because she listened on the podcast and felt like Jeremy was being treated harshly. And she just said, I just felt like this guy doesn't have deodorant or soap or toothpaste. I'm going to send him $20. She's a house cleaner. And the next thing you know, she's like Jeremy's pen pal for years and becoming like this mother figure for Jeremy. And I just thought every one of these stories was extraordinary. Even Oscar's story about like being transferred up and being the watcher over Jeremy and making Jeremy feel better, knowing that Leo didn't hate him and his friends weren't out to get him, but they actually cared about him. I just thought that's the bigger story. And there's all this beauty here that I just, it got all of us emotional. And we just felt like it was an honor to be able to tell this story in the way that we were telling it, even though it wasn't really a true crime story. It has crime sort of, we use that Trojan horse of crime story, but you're going to get something bigger and deeper. And that's what, I think that's what came of this. And it's really, I think, from the spirit of Leo.
I grew up a good chunk of my life in the South, so I still have like Southern Baptist tattooed on my forehead. But there's this verse, John 4:7, and it begins with, and this is what Bone Valley reminds me of. It's, beloved, let us love one another. I really believe that the people in Bone Valley who have received love have shared love with others. And one of the amazing things about the story of Bone Valley, beyond the humanity in it, it really does show me the power of love. Like, Jeremy can't be redeemed or cannot be rehabilitated, but he can be redeemed through love. Leo can't get those years back, but he can be freed by Jeremy's best version of love. Justin can't get a father back and a stable home back, and Jamie can't heal, or her trauma can't disappear, but she can heal and he can heal. And it's all because love is coming from these surprising places, from a guy who's willing to forgive the guy who murdered him, from the murderer himself. It's really, really interesting. I think you've told me a story that in my worst moments of anger or holding a grudge or being down, it's a story of hope against a system that sometimes just pushes in the opposite direction. And I really think it's a story, as weird as this may sound, I think it's a story about love.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I don't say it because it's like, it gets me emotional sometimes, but we all felt it. And, I'll just remind you of another story that like this, when I first met Scott Cupp, first interview with him, the Judge Scott Cupp, the one that gave me the business
Gave you the
card,
idea.
started all this thing.
Right.
Which, he's like, aren't you, you regret this? Like, it's been like 7 years of your life like now. But, the first time we interviewed him, I asked a dumb question because I was still learning about the case. I said, what does Leo mean to you? Without any of the real understanding of where we are now, he just kind of looked at me, his eyes glassed over, and he just kind of like made this motion across his throat, like stop, cut. And he started crying. And I'm like, this is a freaking prosecutor and a judge. And I'm talking about a guy who's in prison for murder, and he broke down. And like, I didn't understand it then. It took me a long time to understand how he gotten to that point. And it's because that's the effect Leo had on him. It's the reason he was willing to risk his legal career by speaking out about this case and also stepping off the bench.
Right.
And I found that a lot with the people around him, from Chrissy, from like corrections officers I'd met who knew him, who did the same thing, like got glassy eyed. And, this is stuff I didn't really learn till later about Leo's impact in the prison. He was like the leader in the prison, like the gang members and the head of the gangs. They would all get together and they would talk with Leo and resolve things. And
oh, wow.
his method was he preached nonviolence in the prisons. And, he told me that like his prison when he was there was the least violent prison in the state because they resolved things. And he told me a story one time where he stepped in between two guys fighting. One guy had a knife and he put himself right in between it. And he just said, "You're not doing this, brother. You're loved here. You're cared about. Don't do this to all of us. Don't do it to yourself." And he just talked him down from it. And I thought, that is the Leo I know. Like, he doesn't just talk the talk. And it doesn't surprise me that, like, after he left that prison, they had a lot of violence.
Right.
But he was a presence in there. And, correctives. When he left that prison to go to the transition program, for parole, he said it was like a gauntlet of staff and administrators like lined up to see him come out of there and, patting him on the back, hugging him.
Wow.
Leo said, "I never saw anything like that before from an inmate."
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting in listening to you say that. I was thinking in the middle of it, like there was a point where like Leo was really in Jeremy's shoes. There wasn't a chance to get out and you had to make the most of your life in there. And he's, and he did it. And he did it. He did it in a way that's really had if Leo had never left prison, he would have had such a positive impact on so many lives just there. And
you're
that's
not kidding.
powerful.
And, that was one of the big things he had to adjust to, like going into the halfway house, was that he didn't feel as useful.
Right.
In prison. He's like, here, I'm just working a mechanic's job and like, I'm living in a house with some guys and like, there's no trouble going on. There's nothing like back in the prison. I had a purpose, and as a pastor and mentoring young prisoners, he took a lot of pride in that, like trying to get people adjusted. Cause that was like for him, it was really very difficult adjustment to like losing your freedom and being young and recognizing like, you got a life sentence. And so he sees these kids come in and it's just like, somebody's got to help him. And, he felt like he didn't have that role anymore. And I couldn't understand it when he'd say like, I really feel like I should be back in prison. Like, boy, I mean, say that, but like those are real thoughts for him. And they weren't for what
it's about purpose. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you should let Leo know we're not done with him. So
yeah,
there's more good to be done.
He's got a bigger purpose.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks, Gilbert. I do appreciate it.
Anytime.
Yeah. Anything else you want to throw in before we go?
No, not really. I just really appreciate you listening and talking about this in the way that you do. So it's just a pleasure. You make me think about things I haven't really thought about, some of your questions. So it's really nice to just have that talking to you. It's like a peer, like just talking about work and story.
Yeah.
It's really nice for me.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. I feel the same way, every time. I was so excited when I got a chance to listen because I knew that it was going to stretch my brain. It's funny, Gilbert. I literally, when I got the first episodes, I said to a colleague, I'm like, it was on a Friday and we were working on a fun project. And I was like, this is a lot of fun. But let me tell you the one thing I'm thinking about. I got to get in here and listen to the season. Well, because ever since, you were introduced to me before I ever met you, someone, told me to read Devil in the Grove. And since that moment before you and I ever met, you've had me thinking. So I appreciate it.
Well, I just appreciate you because I think you really feel like the stories that you're hearing are moving you in the same way they move me.
Yeah.
That humanity side is just so important. And I just love talking to people who feel it and get it, because we had a really great team, working on this, and like we were all like, God, this is so emotional. Like I just this tape, I can't even pick what to use. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what's on the cutting room floor. I bet it's some good stuff.
Yeah, there's some sweet things. Like we put some at the very end, the closing credits, just like stuff we couldn't really figure out a way to use. But it just sort of fit the ending, like just seeing slices of life, like hearing Jeremy talk about the Super Bowl and being excited about a big game coming up, or, just little things like that to children, to Justin's kids. It's just, I don't know. These stories just, they really, they just engross you, and you care about the characters. And like, those are moments we put in for us, and it turns out people like them too.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining for the second of 2 episodes with Gilbert King on Bone Valley Season 2 and Leo Schofield, Jeremy Scott, and all the others around them. If you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We'll see you guys all again in a few days.